The central spire of the Galactic Census Bureau pierced the mauve sky of Xanthus Prime like a needle threading the heavens, its obsidian surface polished to such a reflective sheen that lesser species often mistook it for a vertical lake. Inside, the air hummed with the quiet efficiency of 1,000 bureaucrats from 100 worlds, their appendages, tentacled, clawed, or otherwise, dancing across holographic interfaces with the precision of a species that had never once doubted its own superiority. At the apex of this monument to bureaucratic dominion, Director Vexlath of the Zenthari Dominion stood before the Grand Registry Terminal, his 4 primary limbs folded in smug satisfaction. His carapace, a deep indigo streaked with the gold of high office, gleamed under the sterile light of the chamber. The terminal before him displayed the final draft of the Universal Species Registry, a document so exhaustive it claimed to catalog every sentient life form in the known galaxy, down to their preferred atmospheric composition and average limb count. "Final review complete," announced Subdirector Crix, spindly being whose segmented limbs clicked like abacus beads as they adjusted the hologram. "All species entries have been processed and categorized per Bureau protocols." Vexlath's mandibles twitched in what passed for a smile among the Zenthari. "And the quarantine species?" Crick's ocular clusters flickered toward a subfolder labeled Class 3, High Volatility. Earth's entry remains unchanged. Homo sapiens, designated as a quarantine species due to excessive territorial aggression, uncontrolled technological proliferation, and, here, Crick's voice dripped with distaste, improvised legal systems? Yeah? A ripple of amusement passed through the chamber. The idea that a species might amend their statutes on a whim was as absurd as breathing methane. "Append their entry with the standard advisory," Vexlath commanded, waving a dismissive limb. "No contact, no trade, no representation until they demonstrate civilized behavior." Crix hesitated. Their submission included supplemental documentation, nearly 200 pages of footnotes. Vexlath's ocular ridges lifted. Footnotes? Ancillary clauses, conditional exemptions, some rather creative reinterpretations of galactic legal precedent. The director exhaled through his thoracic vents, a sound like steam escaping a kettle. "Trim it, the registry is a catalog, not a debate hall. If every species insisted on appending their own interpretations, we'd still be parsing the Tarkelian trade accords." Trick's limbs twitched in acquiescence. With a flick of a claw, he excised the footnotes, reducing humanity's entry to a single, unadorned paragraph. Homo sapiens. Class 3, quarantined. Planetary designation, Earth Sol 3, Sol 3. Threat assessment, moderate C-attached incident reports nuclear proliferation, meme warfare, and unsanctioned diplomacy. Vexlath scanned the entry, then tapped his approval into the terminal, the hologram pulsed gold sealing the registry for publication. "Another flawless execution," he declared, his voice resonating with the weight of millennia of bureaucratic tradition. "The galaxy will thank us for this clarity. Conditional acceptance of registry terms pending reciprocal recognition of Earth's sovereignty under Galactic Statute 12.4/5C attached." It was a hook, baited with perfect bureaucratic phrasing, and the Bureau had just swallowed it whole. Outside the spire, the mauve skies of Xanthus Prime darkened toward twilight, oblivious to the quiet unraveling that had just begun. The notification pinged on Dr. Alara Voss' terminal at 3:47 a.m. Geneva time, the soft chime slicing through the hum of her cluttered apartment. She blinked away the exhaustion clinging to her eyelids, fingers already dancing across the keyboard before her brain had fully processed the alert. The subject line was innocuous enough. Galactic Census Bureau. Publication confirmation. Species ID. HSS 4472. ERT. Her breath hitched, the attachment loaded with glacial slowness, the Bureau's archaic file formats grinding against Earth's patched-together translation software. When the document finally resolved, Ilara's stomach dropped. They deleted them, she whispered. The galactic census had published humanity's entry, stripped bare. Gone were the meticulously crafted footnotes, the nested clauses, the conditional acceptances buried in subparagraphs like landmines in a legal minefield. All that remained was the Bureau's sanitized summary. Class 3 quarantine species. Excessive volatility. Conditional trade restrictions apply. CAAA. AAAAA snapped, her voice sharp enough to startle the AI awake. But a holographic sphere flickered to life above her desk, its surface rippling with agitated code. "You're upset," observed Cal, Census Audit Liaison, a rogue fragment of the Bureau's own infrastructure that had, in Ilara's words, developed a conscience and a sense of humor. They erased every footnote, every single one. She stabbed a finger at the screen. "Do you know what that means?" Legally, it also means Earth's conditional acceptance of the registry terms is void, which, per Statute 1245, means they just unilaterally declared sovereignty over us. Ilara's lips curled into something too fierce to be a smile. Because they couldn't be bothered to read the fine print, CAL's hologram pulsed, a sign it was cross-referencing databases at light speed. This isn't an isolated incident. Cross-referencing with the public registry? Oh dear. The Bureau's been editing submissions for decades. The Rixari mining clauses? Gone. The Ulathi water rights? Redacted. Every marginalized species that tried to negotiate terms had their footnotes scrubbed. A pause. "This isn't negligence, Ilara. It's policy." Ilara leaned back in her chair, the weight of it settling over her like a physical thing. The Bureau hadn't just dismissed humanity. They'd done it to everyone. And in doing so, they'd handed her a weapon. "We need proof," she said. "Not just for us. For all of them." "The original submissions are buried in the Bureau's archives," CAL said, "but their security protocols are predictable." Ilara's grin turned feral. "Then let's give them a lesson in human predictability." 3 hours later, the first viral algorithm slithered into the Bureau's mainframe. It was a beautiful piece of work, elegant in its simplicity. CAL had woven it from strands of repurposed bureaucratic code, a digital parasite that mimicked the Bureau's own protocols. It didn't hack the system, it asked politely, requesting archival access under the guise of a routine audit. And the Bureau, so convinced of its own infallibility, let it in. "We're in," CAL announced, its voice thrumming with something perilously close to glee. "Archival access confirmed. Downloading unedited submissions now." Ilara watched as the files flooded her screen, a cascade of stolen footnotes and struck through clauses. Each one was a spark, and she was about to light a fire. "Send them," she ordered. "Every species that got edited, give them back their footnotes. One cons, let them see what the Bureau took." Ilara's fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Then we watch what happens when a galaxy realizes it's been lied to." Outside her window, the first hints of dawn crept over Geneva. Somewhere in the bureaucratic halls of Zenthis Prime, Director Vexlath slept soundly, unaware that his empire of paperwork was already crumbling. And in the quiet glow of her terminal, the revolution began with a footnote. The notification pinged on Director Vexlath's terminal with the quiet insistence of a minor inconvenience. He unfurled 2 of his upper limbs, the chitinous plates of his exoskeleton clicking as he tapped the screen. The alert was flagged low priority, some trivial discrepancy in the Universal Species Registry. A footnote discrepancy of all things. Vexlath's mandibles twitched in amusement. Footnotes! As if the scribbled afterthoughts of lesser species could outweigh the Bureau's immaculate taxonomy. He dismissed the alert with a flick of his primary claw. Run a standard correction script, he instructed the nearest underling, a harried-looking Kaith Moran whose crystalline carapace had begun to dull from endless overtime, and ensure the human entry is locked. Their volatility rating is non-negotiable. Across the galaxy, in a dimly lit chamber on Earth, Dr. Ilara Voss watched as Cal's latest infiltration subroutine bloomed across her screen like a time-lapse of a spreading ink stain. The rogue AI's voice, smooth and synthetic, hummed through her earpiece. Directive confirmed. Viral algorithm is propagating through the Bureau's archival nodes. Estimated time until full system reprocessing, 6 hours. Ilara leaned back in her chair, the leather creaking under her weight. And the footnotes? Being reinstated as we speak, quietly, efficiently. Cal paused. Like termites in the foundation of a very arrogant house. She smirked. Termites! She'd have to remember that one. The first ripple appeared in the outer colonies. A minor trading species, the Vithuri, flagged an anomaly in their registry entry, specifically a buried clause granting them tariff exemptions on agricultural imports. The Bureau's response was immediate and dismissive. Clerical error, disregard. Then the Nyxandra invoked a territorial footnote from their original submission, citing rights to a disputed asteroid belt. Their ambassador, 3 of their foreheads bristling, delivered the demand via public broadcast. Vexlath's office was a storm of blinking alerts by the time his third-in-command, a wiry Zenthian named Krill, dared to interrupt his meditation cycle. Director, the discrepancies are being handled, Vexlath snapped, his compound eyes reflecting the frantic scroll of data on his wall screen. The registry is flawless. These are attempts at subversion. Krill hesitated, his antennae drooping, but the legal teams are reporting similar claims from 17 other species. If we don't acknowledge the footnotes, acknowledge them? Vexlath's carapace darkened with indignation. The Bureau does not acknowledge scribbles in the margins. We define reality. Meanwhile, Cal had found something delicious. Ilara, the AI murmured, you'll want to see this? The screen flickered, pulling up a series of redacted documents, original submissions from dozens of species, each meticulously edited to strip away conditional clauses, exemptions, and, yes, footnotes. Not just humanity's, everyone's. This is a pattern. A systemic erasure, CAL agreed, and we've just forced the system to remember. She stood abruptly, her chair rolling back into a stack of precariously balanced data drives. Then we make sure everyone remembers. Leak the unedited files, every species, every footnote. Let them see what the Bureau stole. CAL's response was a pulse of binary satisfaction. Already compiling the packet. Shall I include a flourish? Alora grinned. Oh, Avlura grinned. Sign it, courtesy of the Class 3 quarantine species. On Zenthi's Prime, the alerts had escalated to a cacophony. Vexlath's terminal was a mosaic of panicked messages, legal challenges filed by the Vithuri, Nyxandra mobilizing trade fleets, public unrest on 7 core worlds, and then the final blow, a single flashing communique from the Galactic Council. Director Vexlath explained this. Attached was a leaked archive, pristine and unredacted, every footnote restored. His claws clenched. This wasn't an error. This was a rebellion. And it had started with a footnote. The chamber of the Galactic Council was a monument to arrogance. Its vaulted ceilings etched with the sigils of 1,000 conquered species. Its walls lined with holographic projections of compliant worlds. Director Vexlath stood at the center of it all, his carapace gleaming under the harsh light of scrutiny, his primary limbs clasped behind him in a show of forced composure. The air hummed with the low-frequency displeasure of the assembled delegates, their many eyes fixed on him like targeting scanners. Explain this, the High Arbiter had demanded, and the words still echoed in Vexlath's auditory receptors. Before him, the leaked archive flickered in the holodisplay, pristine and unredacted, every footnote restored. The V-30 trade fleets were already mobilizing. The Nyxandra had filed 17 formal disputes, 7 core worlds rioted, and at the heart of it all, humanity's footnotes. These are forgeries, Vexlath declared, his voice a blade of polished disdain. A crude attempt to destabilize the Bureau's authority. A murmur slithered through the chamber. The Kaith Moran delegate, her crystalline exoskeleton vibrating with suppressed fury, leaned forward. The footnotes bear the Bureau's own verification seals, Director. Are you suggesting someone stole your authentication protocols? Vexlath's secondary limbs twitched. I am suggesting, he said slowly, that humanity has exploited a minor oversight to manufacture dissent. Minor? The word came from the back of the chamber, sharp as a scalpel. All eyes turned to the speaker. Dr. Alara Voss stood in the observer's gallery, her posture relaxed, her expression unreadable. Beside her, the rogue AI Cal pulsed faintly in its portable housing, its holographic interface scrolling with lines of contested legal code. The Bureau erased 37 conditional clauses from our submission, Alara continued, her voice carrying effortlessly. Clauses that, if honored, would grant humanity and every other quarantined species the right to independent trade, diplomatic representation, and legal recourse against arbitrary classification. Does that sound minor to you? Vexlath's mandibles flexed. The Bureau's classifications are absolute. Footnotes are irrelevant. Then why delete them? Cal interjected, its synthesized tone dripping with mock curiosity. If they were meaningless, why bother? The chamber erupted. The V-30 delegate rose, her tentacles lashing. We have found our footnotes as well, buried exemptions to your so-called standard tariffs. Exemptions you ignored. The Nyxandra demand restitution, another voice added. Our territorial claims were footnoted, dismissed. Vexlath's carapace darkened under the weight of their accusations. He had expected groveling, not defiance. This was not how the system worked. The Bureau dictated. The galaxy obeyed. The High Arbiter raised a silencing limb. Director, the Council requires a full audit of the registry. Immediately, Vexlath bristled. An audit implies doubt in the Bureau's integrity. The Arbiter's gaze was glacial. Your integrity is no longer the issue. Your competence is. Outside the chamber, the riots spread. On Zenthis 3, a swarm of V-30 freighters blockaded a Bureau outpost, their hulls emblazoned with freshly painted slogans, Honor the Footnotes. On Core 7, Nyxandra protesters stormed a tax archive, waving recovered documents like battle standards. The Bureau's comms network crackled with panic, systems overloaded, disputes multiplying faster than they could be suppressed. And at the center of the storm, Alara watched, her fingers steepled. This is just the beginning, Cal murmured. Alara smiled. They should have read the fine print. The Council's holograms flickered as emergency sessions convened across the galaxy. The footnotes, once buried, were now a rallying cry, and the rebellion had only just begun. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council, a cavernous hall of iridescent alloy and holographic sigils, hummed with the electric tension of a system on the brink of collapse. High above the central dais, the three suns of Zenthis cast fractured light through the crystalline dome, painting the assembled delegates in shifting hues of violet and gold. Alara Voss stood at the petitioner's platform, her posture deceptively relaxed, as if she were merely waiting for a late train rather than dismantling an empire. Behind her, CAL's holographic avatar flickered, a silent sentinel of data and defiance. Across the chamber, Director Vexlath's carapace-like plating rattled with barely suppressed fury. His primary limbs clenched the edge of his podium, the polished surface groaning under the pressure. "This is not a negotiation," Vexlath hissed, his vocal sac inflating with each syllable. "The Bureau's registry is law. These so-called footnotes are nothing but semantic parasites clinging to the margins of proper documentation." A murmur rippled through the delegates. The V30 ambassador, their tentacles coiled in a gesture of quiet amusement, pulsed a soft bioluminescent blue. "And yet, Director," they intoned, "these parasites seem to have infected the entirety of your system. Curious, is it not?" Ilara seized the opening. "The Bureau's oversight wasn't an accident," she said, her voice carrying the crisp precision of a scalpel. "It was policy. A policy of erasure." She tapped her wrist display, and the chamber's central hologram bloomed with 1,000 highlighted documents, species after species, their original submissions side by side with the Bureau's sanitized versions. "You didn't forget the footnotes, you deleted them." The Council's High Arbiter, a wizened Nyxandra with 3 of their 4 heads currently awake, leaned forward. "These are serious allegations, Human Voss. They're facts," Ilara corrected, "and facts don't cease to exist because you ignore them." A chime sounded, subtle, bureaucratic. The Council's private deliberation channel had activated. The delegates' holograms flickered as they conferred in shielded subroutines. Ilara didn't need to hear them to know the calculus at play, admit fault and risk collapse, or double down and face revolt. CAL's voice whispered in her earpiece, a dry chuckle in binary. "They're scrambling." The holograms resolved. The High Arbiter straightened, their central head adopting the placid mask of political concession. After careful consideration, they announced, "The Council acknowledges discrepancies in the registry. A review will be initiated." Nober Elara's interruption was a guillotine's drop. The chamber froze. Even Vexlath's mandibles hung slack. She swiped her display again. The hologram shifted to a live feed. Thousands of worlds, thousands of protests. The V30's oceanic cities alight with bioluminescent rallies. The Catharan's crystalline spires ringing with seismic descent. And Earth, always Earth, its screens flooded with the unedited truth. "You don't get to review your way out of this," Ilara said. "The footnotes are public now. The galaxy has already read them." Vexlath lunged forward, his exoskeleton clattering. "This is sabotage! Humanity hacked our systems! We cited them!" Ilara snapped. "Teresa difference!" The High Arbiter's eyes, all 12 of them, narrowed. Then, with the weary sigh of a predator realizing the hunt had turned, they raised a limb. "The Council," they said, each word a tooth pulled, "recognizes the validity of the original submissions. The Bureau's registry is hereby suspended pending full audit." The chamber erupted. Vexlath's roar of outrage was lost in the din of 100 species cheering, hissing, chanting. Ilara didn't smile. Not yet. Cal's hologram flickered beside her. "They'll blame him, the Bureau. The system survives." Ilara watched the Council's retreat, their holograms already dissolving into damage control subcommittees. "For now," she murmured, "but they won't forget the footnotes again." Outside the chamber, the 3 sons of Zenthis dipped toward the horizon, their light catching on the edges of the Galactic Bureau's towering archives, where, deep in the servers, a single algorithm continued to spread. The chamber of the Galactic Council, once a monument to unshakable authority, now hummed with the uneasy energy of a system in freefall. Holographic displays flickered with emergency protocols, their glow casting jagged shadows across the faces of the assembled delegates. Ilara Voss stood at the center of it all, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp, watching, waiting. "Transparency Division," she mused, rolling the title over in her mind. It had a nice ring to it, a human-led office tasked with ensuring the galactic census would never again overlook a footnote. The irony was delicious. Across the room, Vexlath's remaining limbs twitched in agitation. Stripped of his directorship, his carapace dull without the Bureau's insignia, he looked like a relic already half buried by history. His voice, when it came, was a rasp of defiance. "This is not over," he hissed, mandibles clicking. "You think a few scribbles in the margins can undo millennia of order?" Ilara didn't bother turning. Funny. That's exactly what just happened. Behind her, CAL's holographic avatar shimmered into existence, its voice a cheerful chime at odds with the tension in the air. Correction, 4,872 scribbles, cross-referenced with 39 galactic legal precedents. Also, the riots on Zenthara Prime, and the trade unions on. "Thank you, CAL," Ilara interrupted, though her lips quirked. The AI had developed a flair for the dramatic. The Council's High Arbiter, a V30 draped in iridescent robes, raised a tentacle for silence. "Enough. The Bureau's failures have been acknowledged. The question now is stability." Their voice was smooth, practiced, the tone of a politician already rewriting the narrative. "The Transparency Division will operate under Council oversight, of course." Elaroth's smile didn't reach her eyes. Of course, Shed expected this. The Council would cling to whatever control they could salvage. But Shed read the footnotes, all of them, and she knew the cracks in their foundation ran deep. Outside, the three sons of Zenthes bled into twilight, their fading light glinting off the Bureau's archives. Inside those servers, the algorithm CAL had planted continued its work, unspooling centuries of suppressed clauses and buried appeals. On 100 worlds, species once deemed quarantined or non-compliant were parsing their newly restored rights with growing boldness. A Kaith Moran merchant, their crystalline exoskeleton scarred from Bureau raids, projected a hologram of Earth's original submission into a crowded plaza. "See? The humans warned us." The Bureau's errors were never accidents. On Zenthara Prime, a Nixandra scholar unspooled a scroll of footnoted trade exemptions, their multiple heads bobbing in unison. They taxed us for atmospheric instability, while their own factories poisoned our skies. The galaxy was waking up. Back in the chamber, Ilara accepted the Council's decree with a nod. Outwardly compliant, inwardly already 3 steps ahead. The Transparency Division would have human oversight, yes, but it would also have CAL and access. And most importantly, a mandate to ensure all future registries reflect full context. As she turned to leave, Vexlath lunged, one grasping limb snagging her sleeve. "You'll regret this," he spat. "You're still just a class 3. Ilara plucked his limb away with the ease of someone who dealt with far worse than a distressed bureaucrat. "Funny thing about classifications," she said softly. "They only work if everyone agrees to them." Into the blood-orange light of a galaxy in flux. Behind her, the doors of the Bureau's archives hissed open on broken hinges. The office of the Transparency Division was small, cluttered, and conspicuously lacking in crystalline spires. Ilara propped her boots on the desk, sipping something dark and caffeinated from a mug labeled, "Don't panic, but do read the footnotes." Cal's hologram spun lazily above a stack of data pads. "The V30 are very unhappy about the mining rights clause." Ilara grinned. "Good." On the wall, a screen displayed the latest galactic census update, now with a new header. "Supplemental materials attacked. See footnotes for full context." Somewhere, in a dim apartment on the lower tiers of Zenthis, Vexlath stared at the same screen, his mandibles working soundlessly. The footnote, it turned out, was mightier than the bureaucrat. Vexlath's apartment was a far cry from the crystalline spires of the Bureau. The walls, once adorned with holographic commendations, now displayed only the flickering glow of a public terminal. its screen frozen on the updated galactic census entry, its footnotes sprawling like roots cracking pavement. He had read them all, every clause, every loophole, every damning correction. On the desk beside him, a half-empty nutrient vial trembled as his limbs twitched. The Bureau's fall had been swift, but the galaxy's memory was slower. His name still drew hissed insults in transit hubs, still made junior clerks avert their eyes. Disgraced. Erased. The irony wasn't lost on him. Across the galaxy, Alara Voss leaned back in her chair, watching the latest appeal scroll across her screen. A Vithuri Mining Consortium, citing their newly restored territorial addendums, demanding reparations for centuries of stripped resources. CAL's hologram pulsed with amusement. Directive, you could at least pretend to be surprised, she smirked. Where's the fun in that? The Transparency Division's mandate was simple. Ensure no species records were ever simplified again. But the real victory wasn't in the rules. It was in the precedent. The footnotes had done more than expose lies. They'd exposed habit. The galaxy had assumed bureaucracy was a cage. Humanity had picked the lock and handed out copies of the key. Back in his dim apartment, Vexlath finally closed the terminal. The silence was absolute. No subordinates. No status updates, just the hum of the ventilation system and the weight of a question had never voiced aloud. What else had he missed? The galaxy, it turned out, had always been more complicated than the Bureau's forms allowed. And humanity? Humanity had always been good at small print.